A strange, ruined landscape littered with signs of a deadly past life.
It feels like someone was kept down here, not by choice, but against their will.
A place in West Virginia that held some of America's worst criminals.
Things were just getting worse and worse and worse. It had to reach a breaking point eventually.
A unique construction that flew the flag for Cuba following the revolution.
This was Fidel's bright idea. This was the future, and he wanted it done very quickly. But outside, the political climate is definitely changing.
And a colliery that was once the most productive in the UK.
This was obviously once a booming site, but something went wrong here, and fast.
Decaying relics and ruins of lost worlds. They were forged by years of toil and are now haunted by the past. Their secrets waiting to be revealed. In West Virginia, in the USA, there's a vast building that looks like a fortress.
Approaching the building and gazing upon these 24-foot-high walls, it's an immensely imposing experience. There's a distinct feeling that you are going to be unwelcome here.
This building looks kind of like a European castle or palace, but with a very gloomy and highly fortified aspect.
But those expecting to find a kind of fairy tale place are likely to be very disappointed.
Inside, it's really not clear what this place is. There's a canteen with paintings, and upstairs there's even medical and dental equipment. There's something rather dark and sinister about it all.
In fact, this building has connections with one of America's most notorious criminals. And some believe that the halls are haunted by the spirits of those who were once here.
When you get deeper inside, you notice the graffiti, the rusting iron bars, the peeling paint, and the feeling that terrible things happened here.
Clearly, this was never designed to be a happy place, and since it's all now falling apart and decaying, that just adds to the overall air of despair.
So, how did this place become infamous? Local historian Ryan Zacrill knows all about the building's dark past.
This was one of the most horrific places in the world, and still to this day it's notorious for the atrocities that occurred here.
The building dates back to the birth of West Virginia in 1863, when a series of escapes from county jails saw the new state looking to improve the prison system.
The inmates completely up and left and were never found. And it was at that point that they realized they needed something higher security. They needed something more permanent to contain the criminals.
The solution was this: the West Virginia Penitentiary. This was no ordinary prison.
From the very beginning, it was designed to hold the worst of the worst. This place was supposed to be a fortress from which escape was impossible.
But in the 20th century, a frightening social trend began to put pressure on the penitentiary.
In wider society, ever more people were being convicted, and of increasingly violent crimes. The prison was designed to house only a few hundred people, yet it ended up with over 2,000. The result was uncontrollable violence.
To combat the danger, areas of the prison were sectioned off.
The premeditated slaughterings of their fellow inmates made this the most dangerous cell block in the West Virginia Penitentiary. They called this cell block the Alamo because they genuinely believed that they wouldn't make it out of here alive. They had to spend at least 22 hours out of every day locked inside these 5x7 cells, and they are absolutely tiny.
But locking up the prisoners didn't stop the violence.
It was all about survival inside this cell block, and survival meant arming themselves. They would cut pieces of metal off the doors or the bunks, and then once they had that piece of metal off, on the inside of their cell, they could bend down and actually sharpen that knife on the concrete, which you can see scratch marks right here, where an inmate turned that from a dull piece of steel into a deadly knife.
And the inmates here weren't only prepared to kill each other. Chuck Gent was a guard at the facility for 9 brutal years.
What happened was they was doing a survey to find out how hot it got in here, and they stuck thermometers up everywhere. The inmates stole them, broke it open, and stole all the mercury, and then they tried to poison me with it in a cup of coffee. I got fortunate when I happened to glance down into the cup and found it. There wasn't a day you didn't come in here, you wasn't in fear of your life.
The horrors of this place have stayed with Chuck ever since.
You have flashbacks. When you see a guy with a 25-pound weight plate buried in his forehead, or a 12-inch piece of steel that runs up to his eye and up into his brain and out the back of his head. The guy set on fire and he's burning and his skin's boiling and stuff like this. You end up having a hard side to you to survive this.
Despite all that went on inside, the prison somehow became something of a public attraction.
94 men convicted of some of the most violent crimes were executed in a building called the Death House that once stood out here on the North Yard. They used to perform these executions by hanging publicly. People would literally travel miles to come and watch these executions. They would sell tickets to these, and people would bring their whole family. The kids would come, they'd have a picnic during the execution.
While the prison provided ghoulish entertainment for the public, it was also popular with some members of the criminal fraternity. And here's why.
There's this room called the Sugar Shack where prisoners could go. There was no supervision. The guards never went down there. They were afraid to go down there. And all kinds of terrible things happened. Some prisoners liked this setup. Some of them actually asked to be transferred to this prison because they knew they'd have more freedom to engage in drugs, violence, gangs.
Amongst those hoping to find themselves in the prison was one of the most infamous criminals in American history. A man who also had a very personal link to it.
In the late 1930s, a woman named Kathleen Maddox was sentenced to serve time here. She had a young son named Charlie Maddox. This little boy came to visit his mother inside this penitentiary. This little boy eventually went on to become the infamous Charles Manson.
In March 1983, the prison warden was handed a letter. After serving 12 years of a life sentence for the murders that had shocked America, Charles Manson was requesting a transfer here.
There was no way the authorities were going to allow that. And the warden at the prison at the time wrote back, he said it would, quote, be a cold day in hell before Charles Manson moved to West Virginia.
Even without the evil Manson, West Virginia Penitentiary was struggling to be the very thing it was designed for.
West Virginia State Prison was supposed to be a fortress from the very beginning. Just because they built it as an inescapable fortress didn't mean it was actually inescapable.
In November of 1979, we had the largest mass escape from this penitentiary. 15 inmates created a plan to smuggle in a firearm, take an officer hostage, get to the control panel, and eventually let themselves out the front door of this prison. The city of Moundsville was absolutely terrified.
Outside, an exchange of gunfire killed a trooper and an inmate. The other 14 escapees were eventually recaptured. This was just one of more than 200 escapes from the penitentiary.
Prisoners even joked openly about how easy it was to escape. The idea of an impregnable fortress had failed spectacularly.
Eventually, all the inmates managed to get out of the prison because the Supreme Court ruled that the site was unfit for purpose and closed it down. In 1995, its doors shut for the final time. Today, decades after it was abandoned, the penitentiary has become a mecca for those interested in the supernatural.
This penitentiary is thought to be one of the most haunted places in the United States of America. And one of the most common forms of supernatural phenomena is a shadow figure called the Shadow Man. In 2004, a lady named Polly Gear actually captured it in a photograph. She saw the figure walking towards her, so she took one picture down this hallway, and right in front of this door, the figure was standing, looking at her.
Even with the site's worst days long gone, perhaps the horrors here are still not quite over. On the outskirts of the Cuban capital of Havana are the eerie remains of the Caribbean island's turbulent past.
In amongst this lush, green, tropical landscape, suddenly there are pops of orange and red terracotta coming through the palm trees. But they're not rectangular, they're not identical, they're kind of moving with the landscape, they're organic, they're flowing. There's no clear entrance to any of them.
These buildings are so fantastical. Something really ignited someone's imagination and let it run free in these shapes and these designs.
There's one very noticeable thing about their distinctive appearance.
Whoever built this put a lot of thought into how people walking through it would experience it.
So within the landscape, one thing that you really notice is that there's hardly a right angle in the entire place. It's all about exploring round corners. It's all about wondering what lies around the bend.
What was this strange and unusual place built for? And how did it become involved in the Cuban Revolution?
It's clear that there is decay in places, that clearly nature's been allowed to sort of take over in a small way. But then there are some areas that they look like foundations that have never been completed.
There's a sense of whatever stopped that process happening very abruptly.
You have to wonder, why did suddenly construction just stop? It looked like it was going so well.
The origins of this striking site date back to the early 1960s, a time when Cuba was going through a period of extraordinary upheaval. Although they were intended as a place of calm and tranquility to inspire young minds, the grand structures here were born of revolution and conflict.
In the 1950s, Cuba had been under the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista. It was an incredibly corrupt country, and a small group of revolutionaries started a war against the government.
Those revolutionaries were the infamous Fidel Castro and his loyal lieutenant, Ernesto Che Guevara. Together, they would transform Cuba and these buildings forever.
In late 1959, they defeated the army. Castro nationalizes all the foreign industries, all the larger industries, even the small stores and shops will be taken over by Castro. He institutes a thoroughgoing communist ideological state. The Cubans initially saw Castro as a revolutionary, as a romantic figure, and they didn't realize his true nature.
In time, that true nature would bring misery to the Cuban people and threaten the peace of the wider world. But in the immediate aftermath of the bloody revolution, a wave of optimism swept the war-torn country.
In 1961, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, they decide to go and play golf one day in the elite club, a place that they'd previously never been allowed anywhere near.
They say what a shame it is that this has been shut off from most of the Cuban people, and shouldn't they experience it as well? And they hatch a plan, a very ambitious plan, to change this golf course into something else entirely.
So, what did these two revolutionaries have in mind for this place? And why did its architect end up fleeing for his life?
Castro asked a young Cuban architect, Ricardo Porro, to design the site, and he was going to produce 5 separate buildings, each with a separate purpose.
This is Cuba's National School of Art, a series of ambitious structures designed to nurture excellence in ballet, modern dance, visual arts, music, and drama.
This is the birth of an idea. And remember, for your real communists, real revolutionaries, art is very important. Art is there to serve the revolution.
Local man Jose Villa Soberon came here to study sculpture.
I started studying in the year 1966, when I was 16 years old. To a young boy who wanted to study art, it was like discovering a brand new world.
Given just 2 months to come up with the plans, Porro recruited 2 friends to help him. They were Vittorio Garatti and Roberto Gottardi. The young architects poured their heart and soul into the project, taking their inspiration from the changing times in which they were living.
You walk along the corridors and you lose sense of where you're coming from and where you're going, and that was intentional. The message that he was trying to communicate is that Cuba had moved on from its history and was forging a new future.
Each school was unique, but they all shared one clever piece of engineering that helped speed up construction and which encouraged those flowing shapes. The Catalan Arch.
With a Catalan arch, or a dome, you start off with a brick, a very thin brick, and then you use a very quick drying cement and you butt up one against it, and then another one, and then another one. And because it's all held into place quite quickly, you don't need a false work to support it.
After a construction period of just 1 year, and with building work still going on, the doors of the school were opened.
The students arrived while the whole place was a building site and had lessons in the clubhouse and around in the grounds. There was a real family feel. There was a real buzz about the place.
Students would play music to help the workers in their task, and there was a real atmosphere of hope and excitement about the future.
It's like a huge stimulus for imagination. It creates a magical environment for work.
But the campus, modeled on the idealistic dreams of the revolution, would soon turn into a nightmare. Soviet influence in the country was growing, and a deadly storm was brewing.
The Americans see in Castro's friendliness to the Soviet Union a direct threat to the United States. In 1962, the world will come close to nuclear war with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
After the Cuban Missile Crisis, the country was forced to start prioritizing defense over other considerations. And suddenly, this grand project faced a cash flow problem.
And as the Cuban leadership strengthened its ties to the USSR, the country began to see more utilitarian Soviet-styled architecture.
There's a lot of criticism from the Russians about this art school. And there's criticism, again, from some of the Cubans who see that this is a regression.
What was earlier seen as this grand experiment in creativity and artistic freedom now starts to look like it's a bit bourgeois, it's a bit indulgent.
Before long, construction was stopped and the school closed down.
The builders pulled off site, the architects are let go, and the schools are just left as they stand on that day. The ballet school still hasn't even got its flooring in.
But for the people that designed the School of Arts, there was a more worrying prospect. Cast as bourgeois enemies of the state, the Ministry of Construction began a campaign to destroy their reputations.
So the lead architect, Porro, he lived and breathed these projects for a couple of years, and it was absolutely devastated. And he left Cuba and ended up working in Europe and around the rest of the world.
Vittorio Garatti is accused of espionage, he's jailed, and eventually he's expelled from Cuba.
While the closure of the school was devastating for students, today it's going through something of a rebirth. For students like Jose Villa-Soberón, the closure of the School of Arts in Cuba had a lasting impact.
Yo creo que lamento mucho. I really regret not having been able to continue that moment in Cuban culture during the 1960s. It was an era full of romance, dreams, and with such high hopes.
Today, the school is experiencing an unexpected renaissance, with the ambitious architecture finally being given the plaudits it deserved.
In the 1990s, architects from outside Cuba started to take a closer look at these buildings and recognize the creativity that had gone into them.
The future does look optimistic, and although never finished, it looks finally like funding might be available from Europe to complete the job.
Lost in the quiet countryside 50 miles north of Paris are strange dwellings carved into rock.
Some parts of this place seem almost fantastical, but this is only one element in a truly intriguing site.
They hide a surprising secret.
You're out in the bright sunlight in the summer, and then you go through an entrance and you're down in the underground world.
It just draws you into this maze of rock and paths and tunnels. And occasionally you've got trees growing up, escaping out of this tunnel.
In the depths of the site are cold, silent hollows.
You have a feeling of wonder when you go underground and you see these large stone columns and chambers and then tunnels and dark places going off in every direction.
Lining the walls are signs of a former life.
There are clues scattered all over this place. There are markings of names and dates, drawings of figures.
It feels like it could have been some kind of prison, keeping people hidden, out of sight, underground.
But there's one carving near the entrance that seems to offer the biggest clue.
Here you have a carving of the goddess Athena in military gear. You have an inscription, "Never pass." And this is a clue to what this place really is.
So, what was this site designed to stop? It was during the 19th century that this place came to prominence, when a decision was made to rebuild the capital city.
Paris in the 19th century was a mess. It was dirty, diseased, and crime-ridden, and had effectively sunk into a den of sin and vice.
They wanted to build Paris into a city that was fit to be France's capital. The plan was to build these new wide boulevards and avenues, but to redesign a city in this way, you need building materials. And that is where this place came in.
These are the Quarries of Montigny. It was already an established limestone quarry, and suddenly it gained a new importance. For local resident Eric Bouchinet, it's clear to see how the large, heavy blocks were carved out one by one.
Alors on peut distinguer, vous voyez, cette taille de pierre, l'outil qui a été utilisé essentiellement. Ici, vous voyez, on voit l'effort de ces hommes directement. Vous voyez la trace de cette pioche, vous voyez, ces arrondis comme ça.
This was not easy work. It was all done by hand. And you start at the top, you chisel away, you keep going, and your hole just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Et donc, il n'y a pas on voit bien que ce n'est pas d'engin mécanique, tout s'est fait à la force des poignets.
But these are not the only things of interest hidden down here in the darkness. Other walls give clues to a very different use during one of the most brutal periods of the 20th century.
With all the evidence of quarrying here, you now see all kinds of marks from 1914 to 1918 all over the walls. This is clearly a World War I site.
By September 1914, German forces had advanced into northern France. At the Battle of the Marne, they were driven back to this location. What happened next helped shape the nature of the war for the next 4 years.
The Germans were heading straight for Paris, but the British and French managed to intercept them and halt their progress. What followed was the defining experience of 1914 to 18, trench warfare.
There were to be very many dangers for those soldiers stuck on the front lines. But one in particular struck terror into the troops on both sides.
Artillery is the big killer of the war. If you want to avoid the artillery shells, the only solution is deep underground. And by happenstance, the front came to a stop in 1914, very close to here.
This was World War I. Artillery was the key. It was all about bomb power. And so you've got these bombs going off above you, you've got your gunfire, but what makes this place special is obviously you're protected. You've got that stone above you.
The underground lair that had once helped to rebuild Paris eventually became a place that was vital to the defense of that very same city.
Alors ces grands espaces ont été investis par notre armée française. Donc elle s'est investie sur toute la carrière. Alors imaginez un peu le gigantisme. Alors au plus fort, il y avait 200 à 500 militaires qui étaient complètement installés sur toute la carrière et aussi aux alentours.
Underground facilities became a very, very important part of World War I. And you would have, in some cases, headquarters, hospitals, and depots in rear areas. It's a safe place for the soldiers.
It was the last place the men would have gone before going onto the front line, and it was the first place they would have gone to after coming off the front line. There would have just been such a mixed bag of emotions going on there.
The carvings and etchings here are haunting reflections of the troops' unsettling environment.
Alors ces hommes, quand on est ici pendant des jours et des semaines, il fallait bien les occuper et de rester ici, le front est pas loin, donc la mort, elle rôde tout autour, donc pour tuer l'ennui, ils se mettaient à sculpter.
But one area seems to be something more than the work of idle hands, whiling away the time.
Alors vous voyez ici se dresse l'ancienne chapelle construite par un soldat nommé Léopold Maréchal. Il a construit ceci au mois de décembre 1914. Alors cette chapelle a été construite de telle façon que pour essentiellement redonner de l'espoir à tous ces hommes qui étaient stationnés ici. Il ne faut pas oublier que pendant cette guerre, il y a beaucoup de morts, beaucoup de décès. Et pour beaucoup, ils n'étaient pas sûrs de revenir le lendemain. Et donc, il fallait bien un endroit pour prier, etc., pour se redonner un peu de chaleur au cœur.
For the men living here, danger was never far away. The trenches were right on their doorstep. And they knew that sooner or later an attack would come.
The Germans on the other side had their quarries and their underground facilities, and they brought in engineers and they would try to tunnel under the enemy lines and plant explosives.
They had to be alert to the Germans appearing out of the woods or through a secret tunnel that they'd dug. These were fears from which they could never escape.
After 4 years of stalemate, in 1918, a breakthrough came when both sides developed new strategies that would end the static war of the trenches. What would be the fate of the men in the Quarries of Montigny? In 1918, the German army began its last major offensive of World War I, and it would shatter the silence in the deep caverns of Montigny in France.
It's all about the technology coming together with new tactics and applications that can break the trench lines. You initiate a massive opening bombardment just a few hours before the infantry attack.
The Germans were looking for a point of entry, and when they found one, they would have funneled down into the base, bringing the fight to the heart of the complex.
Clues to what happened here are found in the darkness.
Here you can see that there's obviously been some type of hit, but that hit didn't come from externally, that actually came from internally.
Là, on peut distinguer des gros blocs qui sont tombés. Il n'y a pas d'endroit ailleurs sur toute la carrière qui ressemble à ici. Donc il y a eu certainement une grosse explosion déclenchée pour stopper l'ennemi.
But it was all to no avail. Nothing could be done to halt the German attack. The French soldiers had little choice but to fall back.
Essentially, an underground facility like this is not built to be defended. It's a refuge, and if the enemy breaks through, then you evacuate.
Donc il y a eu un déferlement d'hommes ici. Nous, on a dû obligé de fuir parce qu'il y a eu comme l'emploi des gaz. De grosses munitions sont tombées sur nos carrières.
While the situation may have looked desperate, the Allied forces had their own plans to strike back. And within months, the war would be over.
The Germans are becoming exhausted. It's a limited breakthrough. It's a limited advance before it stops and peters out.
So the Allied forces retook the quarry site and the surrounding land, and eventually it was transformed from a war zone to a place of peace.
Just over 6 miles from this base is where the armistice was signed. The blood, loss, and horror that had been witnessed along this line was finally brought to an end.
At last, the fighting days were over for the Quarries of Montigny. Now, it began a new life that recalled its original purpose.
After the war, the quarrying returned, and so people returned, and this place became homes again.
The houses you see here speak of a long tradition, going back to the start of quarrying 300 years ago. The last people to leave only left in the 1970s, and that's their home that you can still see here today.
Deep in the British countryside, there's a sleeping giant.
This complex completely dominates the landscape. You've got beautiful brick buildings. You can spot the ruins of old pipelines. You've got massive towers and pumps, and these piles of broken up rock and concrete everywhere.
The site is highly impressive. There's a vast array of buildings, and it's clear a great deal of money was clearly spent on them. It was once a booming site, but something must have gone wrong here, and quite fast.
Inside the buildings lurk other hidden features that hint at what this site once was.
This was clearly a quasi-industrial setup of some sort, a large-scale operation at one point employing hundreds, maybe thousands of people, all bent towards one crucial task. But now it's a sad, odd place. It's abandoned. It's slowly succumbing to nature.
There are railway carriages just left abandoned, and then this huge chimney. This must be a clue as to what this site was.
Clearly, there was something valuable here that made building all this worthwhile. But what was it? And where is it now? This sprawling work site was originally intended to transform the area of North Staffordshire. But it was no easy task.
When this site was built, the resources of the land around here were ready and waiting to be tapped into and exploited.
So there's great wealth to be had. It's there for the taking, but it's not going to come easy. People are going to have to put their lives on the line to get to it.
The source of that wealth remains hidden from view even today. Nigel Smith is a local historian.
This is Chapley Whitfield, a site that used to produce material that powered a nation.
Coal powered everything. People's homes, businesses, industry. With coal, you had an economy. And with an economy, you had wealth.
The coal seams of North Staffordshire are some of the richest in the world.
Of the coal mines in the region, this was the jewel in the crown. It had the greatest manpower and the highest production rate of any mine.
At one time, it was employing 5,000 people, and 4,000 of those worked underground.
But working here often came at a deadly price. In 1937, one area of the mine wrote its name in history.
There are several shafts on site, but this is the Hesketh. Hesketh is the first shaft anywhere in the UK to be responsible for producing 1 million tonnes of saleable coal.
In today's money, that would be worth over £50 million. It was a hugely profitable business. But to bring coal out of the seams required specialist machinery and some very brave miners. Roy Neat was only 17 when he was first sent down the pit.
I felt terrified at first. It's like the darkness and then the noises. As soon as you hear a noise, you're looking round. Where's that? If you hear a creak, you think the roof's going to come in.
Throughout much of the 19th and 20th centuries, the miners faced many deadly situations.
So a bloke killed. We were salvaging a face, getting all the material off the face. They were pumping cement in the sides. You have to build a big wall, and they put too much cement in, and we just got past, and it exploded out, and the blocks hit him and killed him instantly. And then we had to carry him out of the pit. Very dangerous.
Despite the risks, the wheels of production had to keep on turning. Coal was absolutely essential to the running of the country.
The biggest accident happened in 1881. From records, the accident itself seems to have stemmed from an underground fire that got out of hand, and obviously that ignited the methane gas that was below ground. There was a huge explosion. 24 men and boys lost their lives, and to this day, there are still bodies actually underground.
Over 2 centuries, the North Staffordshire coal seam saw more than 4,500 fatalities. And in the late 1930s, a terrifying new threat came to add to the dangers.
When World War II broke out, the demand for coal in Britain skyrocketed. It was needed to fuel the armaments industry, the munitions industry, to fuel soldiers' homes and their families' homes. They were going to need to produce more coal faster than they had ever done before.
This place had to become an even more productive mining machine, a constant inferno of activity. They had to put in place a whole new infrastructure, which included crushing plants, underground railway lines, networks of pipes on land, and deep tunnels.
The whole British economy was dependent on coal, and the Germans knew it.
Hitler knew how vital the coal industry was to the entire British economy, and particularly its ability to produce munitions, to keep fighting. He wanted to stop the British coal industry at any price.
Stoke-on-Trent was a strategic, high-priority target for the Nazis. The Germans knew what a productive town it was, and they wanted to destroy the industry of the city.
German bombing raids on Stoke-on-Trent had a devastating impact, bringing some of the industry here to a near standstill.
Fortunately, the Luftwaffe never succeeded in destroying the mines. But eventually, cheaper alternative fuels came to threaten the supremacy of King Coal. For the men that worked here, the writing was on the wall.
Oil became a highly strategic product, and the United Kingdom depended on its colonial empire and its dominance of the Middle East for its supply.
In 1946, 90% of the UK's electricity was produced from coal.
By the mid-1970s, that figure had dropped by nearly 30%.
Coal, it seemed, was out.
The mine couldn't compete, and its gates closed in 1977. But the mining industry wasn't prepared to go down without a fight. And what happened shortly afterwards changed the landscape of British politics forever.
It was, without doubt, the most bitter industrial dispute in British history, and its long-term impact is still being felt today.
And strike in '85, that was terrible. 1 or 2 Wentworth, there was hundreds and hundreds of pickets trying to stop them.
Violent confrontations between the picketers and police were common, and the strike ended with a decisive victory for the Conservative government. The collieries were closed, and that was largely the end of coal mining in Britain.
Today, the collieries' huge winding engines lie silent and abandoned. But for the men that worked here, the world that once was will never be forgotten.
It was just brilliant, the camaraderie, and that's what we want to try to do now. We've got a lot of memories.
Now they're abandoned, crumbling ruins. Many remind us of dark times, but some were once beacons of hope and progress, lasting testimonies to human imagination, enterprise, and spirit.